Welcome back to another episode of the Tier 1 podcast. I'm your host, Brent Tucker, owner of FRCC. That's First Responder Coffee, Cigar, and Cask Company. Go to frcc.shop and use promo code Tier 1 to get 15% off the world's best coffee, cigars, and bourbon.
And I'm Drew Tucker, expert of tape guns at First Responder Coffee, Cigar, and Cask Company. See us at frcc.shop. I invite you guys to join our Patreon. It's brought to you by Cobalt Kinetics. As a Patreon member, you'll have behind-the-scene access to exclusive content. There's a fitness forum, there's a weapons forum, and in that weapons forum, there's a Cobalt Kinetics weapon expert ready to answer all your weapons questions. So join the Patreon today.
And as always, this episode is brought to you by Human Performance TRT. Go to hp-trt.com. Use promo code Tier1 and get 20% off all of your testosterone and peptide needs. I'm currently doing a 30-day challenge. I posted it on our YouTube channel. You can follow me doing that using all of our products from HPTRT, including some of the creatine from Tasty Gains. Follow me, and I'll show you the results you can get with the right stuff. All right, Drew, let's do it.
For the Special Forces Rescue.
Welcome to the Tier 1 podcast.
This is amazing, dude. Check this out, right?
And with us today, we have Ric Prado, author of the book Black Ops. Also, as a child, fled Cuba, was an Air Force PJ early on in his career, spent 24 years in the CIA, and at one point, rising to the highest levels of the CIA. I don't say this ever, and we've had some great men sit in that chair. But when I read your book and saw your interviews, I just think you have the most interesting story holistically, between where you came from, what you did for this country, and the amount of time you did it. I am excited about this episode and to hear your story. Ric, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a great honor.
Oh, trust me, the honor is all mine on this one. I assure you on that one. Heck, we had to stop talking before the podcast because I don't think the stories would have ever ended. So I couldn't wait to get into it. And something tells me when this episode's over, we're gonna have more stories to tell in the garage over cigars. Yeah, but I want to get right into it. We normally start with where you came from, because whether they're first responders or special operations, I always want people to know what this person's childhood and upbringing is, and what molds them to become the person that they are. But your beginning story is truly unique, and it's true. Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think that God's got a plan for us and gives us a path, and if we're willing to take it, He grooms you for it. Yeah. And He started grooming me at the age of 7. Cuba, I lived an ideal life. I had a bicycle, a horse, and a BB gun when I was 6. A small town, cattle town. My dad was a cowboy until my mom domesticated him. He became a businessman, but he was always a cowboy. I was 7 years old when the Che Guevara and his group did an attack on the town that I lived in. It was at the bottom of the Escambray Mountains, which is where Che Guevara was operating. And my parents were out of town. So I was with a nanny, and all of a sudden this firefight breaks out right in front of my house. Small town. And I go to the window, open up the jealousy, I'm watching people shooting each other, a couple of people are down. But I didn't notice under the parapet of the window, there was a guy with an automatic weapon, and all of a sudden he pops up, and he lets out auditory exclusion, you name it hit,
Yeah.
So at age 7, I got a glimpse of that. The revolution, of course, changed everything. I mean, that was a drastic change within 6 months. My dad's business was confiscated. I was wearing a uniform. We're being indoctrinated. You don't pray to God, you pray to Castro, that kind of crap. And so my dad decided we got to leave town. We got to leave this. I don't want my son. I'm an only child.
Yeah.
So my dad decided, not my mom. My dad decided that we were going to leave, and but they couldn't get out, and that kept dragging on. And eventually, because we had the visas, we didn't have the exit permits, which was what they were messing with us with. So through a program called Peter Pan, which is a Catholic church thing, I'm one of 40-some kids that were taken out by that program. So at the age of 10, my dad put me on an airplane to go to Pueblo, Colorado, Sacred Heart Orphanage, turned 11 at the orphanage. And this is the point where most people go, oh, poor you.
Yeah.
Oh, poor my mom and dad.
No kidding.
That sacrifice for freedom, not for, I mean, we were more than middle class in Cuba. I mean, my dad had a 57 Pontiac, had a TV and a phone in the house in 1958. So, we were solid middle class. Yeah. But that's where the real sacrifice is, my parents.
I have a son about that same age. I can't imagine. I couldn't imagine putting my son by himself on a plane to go to a foreign country. It's the greatest form of love I can really think of, with no guarantee to see him later.
No, there was no guarantees of that.
There are some other really interesting things that that are happening to you and throughout Cuba at this time about the revolution, and I want to say it boggles my mind, but after what I saw things happen here during COVID, it doesn't as much, and it's the sheep mentality of the masses. You were talking about in your schools in the book that the teachers would encourage the kids to rat
on their parents.
On their parents. And when I first read that, I think the biggest thing that blew my mind is, sure, someone can ask you to do that because they're local teachers at local schools. They know you. They know your parents. They come from the same community, that they would follow those orders and do it. But they did it. Yeah. Blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're the one big difference is we live in a free country. So the COVID thing, there was people that fought it, and you have every right to do that. When Castro took over, very, very shortly, it was total control. Every single neighborhood had a neighborhood watch person that recorded whatever was going on that block. And same thing with the teachers. They were all threatened that, this is what you taught. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, but you described it very well when it makes a little more sense when you peel the layers back, because they kind of flip the things on its head, because the have-nots are now in power, and they can have things that they didn't have before. And that's kind of a general statement.
That's the way it always starts.
Right. And when you look at it through that lens, and you think, how does this happen? And then you get an answer like that, like, you know what? I can absolutely see why people would do that, out of selfishness, greed.
Oh, without a doubt.
Just a lack of integrity and what's best for the community. It's tough. It's tough to watch, and it's also tough to watch when you hear stories like that. When you see the young people in this country want socialism. And I don't know if you can remember the phrase you used, but you had a phrase about socialism and communism. Can you remember that?
Yeah, socialism is the mask that communism wears to suck you into their web.
That's right. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. What's your reaction when you see the young people of America almost yearning for socialism?
Obviously, it scares me and it breaks my heart. They're not as big a majority as people think they are.
I agree with that.
I taught at Fort Bragg at the ASOT for 7 years, and my wife used to wonder if I had a girlfriend in Fayetteville because I hated Fayetteville. I hated the drive, and I would become home bitchy. And one day she literally asked me, and I said, "It's real simple. I'm spending all these weeks up there with guys that I have nothing but respect for." And there's a small vignette with both my sons when they went off to college. When they came back the first time, the first words out of their mouth, unrehearsed, was, "Dad, I thought you and your friends were normal." Because that was their first taste of civilians. But it is very scary and it's very naive. And of course, that's part of the great thing that the Russians and the Chinese do, which is undermine our society with. They've been doing it to our colleges for decades. We just now going like, oh, gee, this is going on. So it's part of the big plan to undermine us, but it does scare me. And I will tell you, there's no coming back from it. Name me one single democratic country that went communist and has,
Right, can't do it.
Flippered.
Yeah. Speaking of Russia, you were before you got your ticket out, you were on a list to go to Russia as a kid, correct? Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah. I went to school in Santa Clara, which was the capital of what was the state back then, and my uncle, who was communist, I mean, he was a school teacher. He saw that my name was on the list of probably 30 kids that were being proposed to go to Russia to study. And I'm glad that blood is thicker than politics, because he reached out to my dad immediately. And that's when the decision to go to Peter Pan, go solo, kind of popped out.
Yeah, I could imagine that was a defining moment to kind of push that one over the edge, that we have to do something. Do you ever stop and think, maybe it's nothing, and we'll get into the PJ and the CIA work here in a second, but that was, that was, we let off with that, so they know you did that. So you were capable of doing great things for a country. Do you ever stop and think, if you had gone down that path, you'd have done the same great things for the wrong people?
Probably so, because I think we're all wired from by nature,
right?
And if you're immersed in that kind of away from your parents, away from that good influence, and you're brainwashed, and then your loyalty changes to whatever it is feeding you, and and I don't mean feeding you just physically, but morally, and using the term lightly. But without a doubt, that would have been a nightmare for me.
Yeah, I thought on several occasions, for whatever reason, particularly Afghanistan, every now and again I'd sit back and I was so lucky and blessed to be born in America, because if I was born here, I'd probably be the same person. You said that's how we're wired, and I get it. I'd probably be fighting Americans too.
Oh, you would be,
right?
Without a doubt.
I would, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter.
Absolutely.
So it is. It's always interesting to see how it's such small changes in your life at a fork in the road will have drastic changes later on in your life.
That's been my whole life.
Right. So your parents did get to come over to the States at some point and reunite with you, correct?
Yeah, I turned 11 at the orphanage. Pueblo, Colorado was if you think it's a blue-collar town now, imagine back in 1962. Luckily, I love horses, so the only place they would take us was a rodeo, so I was happy. But it was a rough start. You go into you don't speak the language. There's 2 or 3 different cultures, ethnicity differences, and a lot of pissed off kids, because who wants to be an orphan, right?
Yeah.
So after my first clipping, I learned to hit first, and that's why I learned to fight. That ain't happening again. But yeah, I think that was arguably the first real molding of or forging of my sword of what I was supposed to become. First, the having to leave your parents, having to leave everything behind, and end up in an orphanage. But my parents came out about 8 months later. I was one of the lucky ones, and we were able to reunite.
But still, when you're that young, 8 months is an eternity.
Oh,
that's 10% of your life.
Yes. Yeah.
Did Did you think you were going to see your parents again? Did you have hope as a kid?
You know, my dad was an exceptional guy, my first hero, and still my number one hero. And he brought me up to be the little cowboy. This is how a man acts, this kind of stuff. And I remember when we were going through the process at the airport, which was pretty brutal, before I went into what they call the fishbowl. It was glass. After that, you were actually going to be searched and stuff. And I told my mom was crying, and I told my dad, if she keeps crying like this, I ain't going. And my dad took a knee, put his hand on my shoulder, and said, "You have my word. I will see you again." That was my security blanket for those 8 months. Yeah.
How hard was it for him to get out of the country?
Well, they had to do bribes and all that other stuff because what people don't understand is when you were in Cuba and you applied to leave Cuba, all your assets were frozen on the spot. Your bank money, they took inventory of the stuff in your house. So in a small town, my dad had a 57 Pontiac, he had a Deuce and a half, he had a Jeep, he had a beer. So it was like, who's going to get what? And until that's settled, they're not going to let you go. So yeah,
that's kind of crazy on one aspect, but I could imagine that Pontiac went pretty far and leveraging his escape.
Yeah. No, I mean,
if they're going to be greedy, you can also use it against them.
And he had stashed a little bit of money, and he spread it around, and eventually he was able to get his.
There's just so many aspects of this when you really kind of step back and look at it, and now I'm looking at it as a parent, and I'm sure it was to some degree an easy decision, but it doesn't mean it's not a difficult process. Like I said, they were middle class. They had things. He had everything he wanted to some degree. I'm making some assumptions here, but had a family where he wanted to be in a country he wanted to be at the time until it changed. And then did he know English?
Not a word.
You have to assume not your dad or your mom. And then they get out and they have nothing now. They have nothing. They have nothing in a foreign land. Their son is somewhere over there. They have to go find him and start fresh, and not even. It's just a monumental thing to ask a family to do, and led by the father to make those decisions. What a great man.
Yeah, I mean that experience. You could imagine when I finally came down from the orphanage, we were sub poverty. I mean, literally.
Yeah.
And the only thing my dad he never took a government check. He was mowing lawns and loading trucks. My mom was working in a sweatshop. She did that for 10 years. But yeah, it was a very brisk decision for my dad. But my dad also made another decision shortly thereafter. We hadn't been in this country a year when my dad sat us down and says, "We're not going back."
Yeah.
Because the dream of every Cuban was to leave because we have to, but eventually come back. Well, 67 years later, we're still in this mess.
Yeah.
But my dad, less than a year in country, he said, "We'll go back to visit, but this is where I want my son to grow up."
I don't intentionally mean to turn and make this political, but at the end of the day, we have to live in reality. I think there's some Americans that are upset about on both sides, and one side, I would say rightfully so, upset about the immigration situation that our country is in right now. And they think the right hates immigrants. And that's just simply not true. I love that story. I'll take as many of those immigrants as we could get.
Thank you.
Because they came over grateful to give back. You said he wouldn't even accept any welfare checks. Yeah. That's amazing. That's what they came over here to do. The problem isn't that the country changed; it's the immigrants that came over here changed, if you will. It's more of a what can America give me as soon as I put my feet on this soil, and that's what has to stop. Not the immigration doesn't have to stop. The type of immigrants we get has to go back to that.
Yeah. Well, the illegal part is a very big deal. I mean, our country is our home, and if you knock on my door and you're my neighbor and I know you, I'll let you in. But if you break into my house, I'm going to shoot you. That's what we protect, right? It's the same thing with our country.
That's right.
So I'm all for immigration, legal immigration. We need them at all levels, from people to paint your house to doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs, because those exist.
Right.
But the biggest difference between the immigrants, especially from our generation, was the average American has nothing to compare this country with. The average American travels. They usually go to a 5-star hotel in Italy. They spend 2 weeks there. They come back. Oh, I want to live in Italy. It isn't the same. There's nothing like this country. We have something to compare with, and I think that's the bonding between, Venezuelans are left, Nicaraguans are left, and of course the Cubans and many more that have left because of oppression. Vietnamese. I remember doing Rolling Thunder in Virginia all the time, and Vietnamese families in the street corners waving the American flag. I'm going like, they get it. They understand.
Right.
They're enjoying the
They're assimilating. Yeah.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
That's the goal. That should be the goal.
Here at the Tier 1 Podcast, we're excited to have Tasty Gains as a sponsor, a company with values that aligns with ours. I take their products every day, 3 times a day. And if it wasn't a product that I didn't take personally and believe in, and a company with integrity, then they wouldn't be sponsors on this show. Creatine helps the body produce more ATP, which is an energy molecule that your entire body runs on. It helps improve your physical and mental performance in all aspects of life. Let's be honest, creatine powder sucks to take every day. With the creatine gummies, you can take them with you anywhere, and they taste great. Every batch is third-party tested, so you know you're getting exactly what you pay for. Go to tastygains.com and enter the promo code TIER1, that's TIER, the number 1, and get 20% off your order. When the family finally got reunited, where'd you guys settle in at?
We settled in a ghetto, literally, in Key Biscayne, Biscayne and 22nd, which back then was, shambles. And we had a one bedroom efficiency, but it was my mom, my dad, and me, but also my aunt and my 2 cousins that had come out the same way. And we were all living, like I said, my mom and dad shared the couch. I had a cot, and my aunt slept with the 2 kids in a full-size bed. That was it. Our pets were cockroaches, and there was nothing there. So it was definitely tough. And I remember one day my cousin's younger, about 6 years younger, and my dad had just come back from loading trucks or mowing lawns, whatever he was doing, and the ice cream truck drove by. And being kids, I was 12, and hey, can we get an ice cream? My dad started crying. He didn't have a nickel in his pocket to buy his son or his nephew so.
Man, that's just a story of sacrifice. But like everything, bad times don't last, but they come. But they come and go. And if you do the right thing, you do the right thing hard enough, they don't last.
And if you're tough enough to survive it, a lot of people cave in. A lot of people cave in.
Yeah. How old were you when was the Air Force was that your first? I don't want to say first job. Something tells me you had a bunch of jobs before then, making ends meet for the family.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I loaded trucks. My dad, a factory. My dad was a foreman at when I was in high school, But I was 20 years old when I went into the Air Force.
Why the Air Force? What drove you that way?
I get that all the time. That's the biggest. Why did you go this? Nobody in my family had ever served, so I really didn't know the difference between Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marines. And I wanted to be a dive guy. I mean, that was my dream. I was going to be a professional diver. That was what I was doing there in junior college. And in an oceanic Africa class, there was a guy sat next to me. We became friends. His name was Glenn Richardson, and he was a PJ. He was around the reserves. And we got to talking, and after we got to know each other, he started telling me, well, we show me pictures, and I'm going like, wait a minute, I get to jump out of airplanes, shoot guns, do medical shit, mountain climb, and I get a cool hat. I'm in. So that was the deep thought that went into Pararescue. It just happened. But, again, like everything else in my life, when I've made a decision, or I should say when he makes the decision and tells me which way to go, sometimes with a 2x4, it has always worked out. I don't think my life would have been the same if I had not gone the Pararescue route. I think that others may live aspect of Pararescue has been a motto that has followed me through my life. So
I completely agree. Of course, when I say why the Air Force, it wasn't a derogatory hit towards the Air Force. I just love that you signed up and you served. I wouldn't have cared if you went in the Coast Guard, the Navy, the Air Force, what you did. But you said it several times, and of course the book on the corner of my desk will be an indicator that we probably share the same belief system. But there was a plan, and you went in the Air Force PJs because, as we'll find out later, it gave you airborne status. It gave you the military combat or that military dive experience. That is a really cool story. Can't wait to get into. And it gave you medical training that you're going to use as a singleton or using in small teams in austere environments, and you have that. It was really the perfect first step for what you're about to do.
I've looked back a couple of times and said, if I would have gone Green Beret, 18 Delta, or anything like that, it wouldn't have been the same. It wouldn't have been the same.
How long did you spend as a PJ?
Well, I went into Pararescue in 71, December of 71, got my beret in late 72, early 73. Vietnam was over. I went in because I wanted to go to Vietnam. So I was stationed at Homestead Air Force Base. So I did 2 years active training, 1 year active. And yeah, it was fun. I was jumping 3 times a week and going out on the boats and doing all this, great stuff. But I wasn't making a difference. And that's why I started getting hungry for doing other things. But yeah.
I get that. I changed careers as well for the same reasons, because you want to do something tangible, and you applied for the CIA?
Yeah,
right out of there. You spent some time in 20th Group as well. Had that all intertwined.
Yeah, it was, like I said, I always wanted to be, I read a lot. I've always been a reader. And so for me, OSS days and, even Vietnam stuff, that wasn't that much back then. But, and of course the James Bond novels and all this other stuff was, Sea Hunt is what got me into diving. Thunderball is what got me into Pararescue, because that was like the tipping point. And it was just what it was meant to be, I could have planned it. I've never planned my life. I've always gone with my feeling of making a difference.
It wouldn't have mattered if you planned your life anyway. It wouldn't have gone according to your plan, and thankfully, it wouldn't have gone
without
according to your plan.
Listen, there isn't a morning I don't pitch myself. There isn't a morning. I look back and I go, you are a blessed individual. What you experience, the friends you've made, hopefully the difference that you've made, that's a great badge for me.
And I believe it was the first time you put in for the CIA was early 70s, correct?
Yeah, 74.
That was a bad time to put in an application.
Yeah, they came back with, and of course it was handwritten because, and it was, hey, I'm Cuban, I hate communism, I speak 2 languages, I'm a PJ, I'm single, love to mingle, put me in, coach, kind of shit.
Yeah.
And they came back with a really nice way of saying, we are firing, not hiring. Because this is post-Vietnam, as you know, the attrition in both the federal government, especially CIA and the military, was
drawn down.
So with that, I went into the Miami-Dade Fire Department as a rescue. Again, I never thought of being a fireman, but one of the senior PJs was the captain of Metro Fire Department, and he was in charge of rescue. So he's the one that recruited me to go into rescue. And I rode rescue in Dade for in the 70s, which were the drug years and the drug wars. I had 6 years of hands-on experience that if I ever got shot, I'd rather have a Ric Prado next to me at the time because my skills were really, really good.
Yeah.
And that was the tipping point for the agency. I applied again in 1980, and this time, this was when I was with the 20th, they came back and said, well, we could use you on contract. We have this thing called Special Activities Division Ground Branch. I didn't know anything about it. So that's our paramilitary group, and because of your language and because of your advanced medical stuff, we could use you as on contract, sometimes for a mission, or sometimes for training. And so I did that. I would take leave and I would go spend 3 weeks with them and back. That's how I got my toe in the door.
Yeah.
And then in 81, early when Reagan took over, and he declared war on communism, the agency did not have a native Spanish-speaking guy with a paramilitary background. So they called me up, and I had just gotten divorced from my first marriage. And so it was, again, perfect timing. And they asked me if I wanted to come back to work. And I said, well, if it's contract, no. If it's full-time, yes. He says, no, this is full-time. And that's where it started.
And before we get into that, was there any, with your background, being Cuban and with JFK and the Bay of Pigs debacle, did that have any effect on you as far as as how you viewed America? Because we really, that wasn't our best showing. We left some people hanging on that one. And I'm not going to go into the whole history of Bay of Pigs, but if you guys don't know exactly what happened to Bay of Pigs, please look that up. But we basically sent in a force, just a really bad general overview. We sent in a force to take over Cuba and push back against communism. And then when they hit the ground, we were like, nah, we're not going to give you air support after all.
Yeah,
it
was actually
about 3 days.
It was actually even worse than that, Brent, because I had the pleasure of working with CIA guys that were part of preparing that program, and the original plan for the invasion was nowhere near Bay of Pigs. I know Bay of Pigs because I used to go fishing there with my dad. It's mangrove. That's all there is. There's the town Cienfuegos, which had a deep port right by the mountains. The highway went through there. That was the original plan that Eisenhower bought off on.
Okay.
When it came to Kennedy, the politics, you cannot do politics, you cannot do special operations of any kind through a political optic, right?
Right.
They started, well, it has to look like it cannot look like an invasion. It has to look to put a couple of thousand guys in a mangrove. And then, like you said, the air support that was promised was negated at the last minute. But that didn't affect me as an American, of my opinion of the United States, mainly because I came to the United States. I saw what this country was all about. But it was also reinforced when I went into the agency, and now I'm talking with people because I thought it was a fiasco. Also, what a screw up, and sitting down with them and them explaining to me how that happened, it was eye opening.
There's no use crying over spilt milk, and there's nothing you can do about the past. But how crazy is it that they were so right to do that? And they were so close to taking care of that problem that was going to be a thorn on our side for decades and decades and decades to come.
Well, you figure the missile crisis, which happened literally a year, almost to the day of Bay of Pigs, and I remember people giving credit to Kennedy for diffusing that situation, and of course, the Cubans in Miami were going like, if you would have let us take over and done it right that time, you would have had a missile crisis because there would have been no missiles there.
Right. Well, after hearing that, and had they put them in the proper place that the military planned on, but even the wrong place, more than likely, just with air support, it had changed. It would have
at least, I think, with the late plan with air support would have at least allowed an insurgency to grow,
to gain momentum,
and gain momentum, and be supplied and everything else. The original plan would probably have been the downfall of the regime immediately. because that the impact of the attack, once the stuff is neutralized, if we're well supplied with weapons, the guys had the training, it would have been pretty easy.
Go down a rabbit hole here real quick, just because it's relevant to this particular conversation. You might know this, probably know this. JFK was never a big fan of the Vietnam War and getting involved in that. And when they told him, why they're doing this, it's to stop the spread of communism. JFK had a great rebuttal and basically said, well, if communism is what we're worried about, why are we worried about Vietnam halfway around the world? We got Cuba at our doorstep. Yep. And so he had the right idea, which makes it almost a little bit even more perplexing that it was his call to not continue with the air support. But we had the right idea to keep communism off of our doorstep then, and we just... Well,
presidents are all influenced by the people around them.
Yeah.
And there were some State Department real heavyweights that they're the ones that kept pushing away from a real military solution and into more of a, let's make it look like one and let's see what happens kind of stuff, which, yeah.
Well, back to your days at the CIA. So you finally get into the CIA as a contractor. You get your toe in the door, as you put it. What brought you in full time?
Yeah, when Reagan took over and declared war on communism, that's when they went after Nicaragua first, and Salvador. We're very much involved in Salvador also. But my main job for the next 3 years was to train, and lead and work with the Contras, which were the peasant force that was fighting the Sandinista regime, which was declared communist even before they took over, and it was fed by Russia via Cuba. So that was my foot in the door, and like I said, I spent Monday through Friday for 3 years sleeping in a jungle hammock in the border of Nicaragua and Honduras, and it was the best job I ever had in my life.
And just so everyone can keep up and zoom out, a second, what was going on? Just like you referenced, but specifically, Russia was pushing communism through Cuba, and then they were continuing the spread of it, and they wanted to communize as much of South America and Central America as possible. And there was just
without
a
a
lot
doubt.
of influence going
Cuba
on.
became the conduit. You figure they went into Africa even before really getting down into Latin America. They were down there for a decade messing with that. But yeah, Salvador was on fire. There was the communist guerrilla groups were making great advances there, even in the city. Nicaragua was overthrown very quickly, but that all came through Russia, through Cuba. The same thing of Che going to Bolivia and all that other stuff. It was part of that.
And
bigger
why not?
plan.
They had success,
It's a proxy
and
thing.
they had success in Cuba flipping that. And they were just going to keep flipping countries.
That was the goal.
Yeah, and that was our answer to stop it. Not as much as an overt answer, but a covert answer.
It started as a covert problem, and this is why the book is called Black Ops. As you know, it's Black Ops are for us is what the American hand has to be hidden. That's a real Black Op. So for the first 2 years of that program, it was a Black Op. It hadn't leaked. For the first 14 months of those 3 years, I was the only CIA officer allowed in the camps.
And let's dig into that a little bit, because that sounds very professional. And I'm not saying you weren't, but it sounds like you were a highly trained person that went into this mission from the CIA, and you hadn't been to the farm yet. You basically got pulled in and sent right down there.
Alias Docs and gone. That was it. Yeah.
What a welcome to the CIA moment.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And you were the only boots on the ground there for a while as well. You had a support team, but forward, it was just you.
It was just me. We actually started the program with 5 people.
Okay.
One of them, Ray Doty, we call him Colonel Ray, was a Green Beret Vietnam vet. jumped into Corregidor at 17, kind of guy, bigger than life. He was my first boss. And I was blessed with that because his orders to me were, go there and make yourself indispensable.
Okay.
And win their hearts and minds. Move it, got it. So that was the training that I received was 3 sentences. Yeah.
I don't know if this applies to this situation, but you let me know. There are instances where the less you know, the better, and even to some degree, the less indoctrinated, and I mean like militarily or paramilitary indoctrinated, because you go in with this mindset of playing within this box, but when you go in without that, everything's open to you because you don't know any better. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
No,
but
it's
does that make
actually a
sense?
great point. And I actually compliment you because this is the first time anybody has caught on that. And it's absolutely true. I tell people, I said, I did stuff that I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do.
Yeah.
You know, they told me, go there, make yourself essential, lead these guys, train these guys. And, of course, that opened up a lot of doors for me to have a lot of fun. But without a doubt, it was when I got to the farm and started getting indoctrinated in the do's and don'ts, I'm going, oh, shit.
Yeah.
Glad I didn't write that one up, this kind of stuff. So,
But you know, when you maintain that problem solver mindset along with training, that's when you can be really dangerous. And I'll tell you why I know to ask that question is because I was running human ops within our ASO cell in Iraq, and I wasn't level 2 qualified. I just got pulled in to do it. And I got some results that I had got done easier because I did them the wrong way.
yep.
I did them the right way.
The right way, yeah.
I did them the right way for results.
Not the textbook way.
But the wrong way, for textbook and story
and
for another
regs.
time. Maybe even not completely legal because there are rules, but I didn't know the rules, so I didn't know to play by them. But I got results.
Same. And like I said, that's a very astute question. It's the first time that it comes out in any of my interviews. So, thank you.
They had you. I mean, you were playing a local. I mean, Black Ops. You're not down there as a U.S. representative. You were playing the role of a foreign officer in that country.
Yeah, I was there as a Honduran major. Hondurans were extremely supportive because, of course, their future was online too there. And that was my cover. I had my ID said I was an intelligence officer major for. Very seldom that I ever even use that because once they get to know you, they get to know you. But it was a great opportunity because, like I said, I was there when we were really cranking this stuff up, and being able to make friends at every camp and see the quality of people. You know, I think that was one of the most rewarding things about my stint there, besides the cool ops that we'll talk about in a little bit. It was the moral example of why I was there. At night, I would sit down at a different fire every night, and I would ask the Contras, why are you here? And there wasn't a single one of them that said, well, you know, I read Marx and Lenin, and I am totally against that. No, it was like they raped my daughter, they burnt my church, they beat up my priest, they took this away from me, you know, my kid, whatever. It was very personal, and that was so rewarding for me.
Yeah.
You figure 3 years, sleeping in a jungle hammock and waking up in the morning and never saying, "Oh shit, what am I doing here?" Yeah. It was never that. It was quite the opposite.
That's a motivated guerrilla force.
It was,
and that's what you want. In fact, you beat me to my next question, which was what was their motivation? Because that's so important when you partner with someone, and if it's money, you can get people to do something for a paycheck. You can. But when things get tough, money will not be enough. Yeah. If you really want to turn the tide, it will have to be personal.
You know, the difference between the first time I set foot in a camp and the last time I stepped out of a camp, 3 years later, it was incredible. I mean, the first time I went to the camps, these guys didn't even have shoes. Most of them were in flip-flops, torn jeans, captured AKs. They had bolt-action rifles. Mauser's 308s kind of thing. Very little food. Living conditions were atrocious, but we were able to prop them up. Get them with the right logistics and training and everything else. And but you're absolutely right. It was the quality of individual and the conviction of why they were fighting.
Yeah. How old are you at this time?
I was 30. Yeah.
Okay.
I had just turned 30 when
That's a good age.
it was a great age.
It's a good age. Old
I
enough
barely
to know,
remember, but
old enough to know better, but still too young to care.
there you go. That was exactly it. And I had no baggage. I mean, I had met my now wife for 43 years, but we were still kind of dating. She didn't even know what I did for a living.
Yeah.
I'm overseas kind of stuff. But no, it was a great time.
Is there some moments you can think of during that where you did sit back and think, might be a little over my head on this one?
No.
Love it.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this earlier. The scuba thing, how that came to be was very interesting because I wore when I was in uniform, I had my scuba badge.
Okay.
Even though the Hondurans didn't have scuba badge, but who was going to challenge me, right?
Right.
And I'm in the Mesquite, which is where the Native Americans of Central America live, and there were 3 or 4 or 5 guys hanging around. One of them came up to me and says, "Excuse me, Major, are you a diver?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a military diver." He says, "We're divers also." I said, "Oh, really?" He goes, "Yeah, we're lobster divers." I go, "Oh, that's really cool." Store it, move on.
Right.
Shortly thereafter, we get a directive from headquarters saying, "Hey guys, you're doing a great job in ambushes and harassment, but we need a left hook. We need something to let the Sandinistas know that this is serious. This isn't just a ragtag bunch of individuals out there."
Yeah.
And that's when I came up with the idea of blowing up Puerto Cabezas. Puerto Cabezas is in the northeast side of Nicaragua, and that was the belly button for all the military material that was coming from Cuba. So I got these 6 guys. 2 didn't make it. The other 4, the other 3 were divers. The other one was the boat captain. And we literally took an 80-pound plume charge, swam it under the bridge, and blew Puerto Cabezas Pier up. And the amazing thing for me with that was I did that with no other training other than my PJ background.
Right.
PJs are very water-centric, obviously, as you know, for the scuba stuff. And
But not necessarily offensive scuba.
right.
So I love that. Even though that's not necessarily what you were trained for, it was a piece of it, and you're like, I can still do this.
Yeah. And we did, and I mean, it was very successful. I remember the first time seeing satellite imagery in my whole life was when they showed me the impact of the attack that we had done, and that got their attention. That was really got their attention, but again, I had the vision of what needed to be done. I had a boss that was supportive. At the time, the agency was in very friendly hands. We had individuals who were like-minded. Bill Casey, who was the best director the agency ever had, was a former OSS guy. Dewey Claridge, one of my mentors, was his pit bull. I just had that kind of support. We were serious about what we were supposed to do, and nobody was asking too many questions of me of how we were getting it done. They were just going, "It's getting done."
Yeah. Man, as you tell me that, I just think of the results of that operation, like through the lens of the enemy. When you talk about sending a message, clearly it's not a ragtag bunch we're dealing with anymore. They have explosives. They have an underwater capability that I'm sure the enemy doesn't have.
It blew their mind.
Right.
Who
are we really dealing with?
Yeah, it's one of these. It was as big of a psyop as it was a military success. Yeah.
Right, and then of course the secondary effects of taking away a bridge and taking away a resupply line away from that's going to take them a long time to.
Yeah, there was another port further south. I can't remember the name of it, and that's where they had to divert. Now it was way on the southeast. Eventually, obviously, they fixed the pier and they were able to, but it was damaged for quite a while, and it was the impact. Like you said, they got the message. This is serious.
resupply for you. Again, everyone wants to hear a war story, and so do I, because they're cool.
Yep.
But when you're doing these operations, I had a very wise team leader early on in my SF career tell me that amateurs talk tactics and professionals talk logistics.
Yep.
And without logistics, it doesn't matter what you want to do, you can't do
If
it.
you don't have bullets, fuel, airplanes,
That's
and
right.
everything else,
Yeah.
you
Was you guys have a solid logistical line? Because that's tough when you're running with a guerrilla force. 'Cause
Yeah,
sometimes you can get creative, and sometimes it's very difficult.
It was very, very difficult, especially at the beginning, because again, we could not have the massive presence that eventually was down there. I mean, when I was running the Southern Front from Costa Rica, 86 through 88, subsequent to the farm and everything else, we had 100 people at the base. It was the largest station, CIA station in the world at the time was Tegucigalpa, because that's where our base of support was at. So
How did you guys overall define mission success there, and did you guys eventually achieve it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is the icing on the whole cake. There was the fact that this became the first black op, even from before Vietnam, that the agency was successful. It took us years because I was gone and other generations took over, but eventually in the early '90s, the Sandinista had to capitulate and have an election that was overseen by all kinds of countries, and they lost. So it was actually without the military pressure that we were able to put on them, they would have never caved in. But they knew that it was going to another level. So
Yeah, I love to hear that. So when at some point you leave there and you go back and you finally get formal training. To some degree, that has to be a little tough because you're like, I've already done this job.
Yep.
And you have way more experience than anyone else in that particular field
Yep.
of people going, which can, of course, help you because you're like, I know I've seen real life experiences. I know how to apply this, so it makes it, I think, a little bit easier. Do you think to some degree you can know too much going into the school and it can hinder you a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, first of all, I was going from a blunt object to a more surgical career, of course, because, everything in CIA is not boom and bang like I was doing
Right.
for 3 years. But the fact that I grew up poor and I grew up with a rough crowd and all that kind of stuff, I had street smarts that the average student in that class didn't have.
You can't teach it.
They were, college kids that were smart, they were from this school and that school, and I'm going like, oh, geez, I barely made it through George Mason. I got my degree, and that was with the agency.
Yeah.
So it was, but I had that street savvy, and even in the scenarios of training that they put us through, I did very well at the farm. I'm not bragging. I know that I did very well because I was told by my counselor, and it was that street smart. There were times where things came up that were curveballs that if I had been just a very smart college kid, I would have sat there and and I had an answer for it. I had a way. And also I think that having the background of what I went through as a kid and then Pararescue, it gives you a little different persona when you're sitting across the table from somebody you're trying to recruit. Whether they're good guys or bad guys, we don't care. We got to recruit you, and for them to look across the table and go, yeah, I ain't messing with this guy. Yeah, this guy he's straight up. I think I had that a lot of my teammates did not.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that one. You can call it something fancy like a high social IQ, but it's street smarts.
Yep.
And you can be the smartest guy in the room and have no situational awareness. You can be the smartest guy in the room and have almost zero ability to read a person. And there's something about someone with street smarts that's just able to read a person within 30 seconds and with no real training, be able to guess what that guy's background is, what motivates him, how you should talk to him, how you should interact with him, what he respects, what he doesn't respect. And a guy with street smarts can do that very quickly, and that just pays dividends throughout a job like that. And you can't teach it.
Eventually, by experience, like I said, all my classmates in the school did very well. A couple of them were former this or that military. One guy was SF. Fortunately, he died of cancer pretty young. But later on in life, I saw these guys and gals just kind of blossom and really get it. And now, because it's like everything else, now they're being exposed to living in a third world country, dealing with a different culture, a different language.
Right.
And after a year or two of that, your magnet changes and you start really seeing things that you weren't aware of before. And I've taught this to almost every class I've ever been through, especially when people talk about guns. Awareness will beat fast draw every single time.
Yes, it will. That is true. In fact, you may not even, lack of awareness will get into a fast draw situation.
Absolutely.
And we'll probably talk about this a little bit later as well, but which is really unfortunate about the Nick Rowe incident because
But that's a really strong pet peeve for me because I got to be at Bill Buckley just once, but I mean it's like, oh my God, Bill Buckley kind of stuff. Vietnam, he was a legend, legendary, and same thing with Nick Rowe.
Yeah.
And what they did with Bill, they sent him to Beirut to be the chief of station when things got really, really shitty because he's the only guy that had the stones to say, yeah, I'll go do that. But he wasn't a case officer. His tradecraft absolutely sucked. I mean, I've read, every book on that and talked to people that were, again, in that. And it was just amazing. He parked his car. He had a Volvo, parked it in front of his apartment in the same place every time. Ate at the restaurant across the street. And when he got wrapped up by Hezbollah, he had his Browning high power in his briefcase. He was a fighter. He was a guerrilla fighter, but this wasn't his jungle. And that's exactly the same thing that happened with other cases that you mentioned. Yeah.
Complacency kills. And I say this all the time, even in combat, when you would think there would be no complacency, it is hard to be on high alert every day of your life. Yep. Like it's just not human nature.
It's not human nature.
Yeah, and you have to fight it all the time because, especially in jobs like yours, the movies do a horrible job of keeping it action packed and sexy, and when the reality is, it's boring.
A lot of it is.
A lot of it is. And when it's boring, it's hard to not get complacent because you're not challenged every day.
Yeah.
So it's very tough.
Yeah, I'm very proud that I never had that issue. I remember chastising fellow station members that they're going in prepared. They're leaving at the last minute to a meeting. And maybe because even in my case officer days, I never had the European tour where I'm meeting diplomats. Yeah. I started dealing with scumbags very early on. So it was all counterterrorism, counter-narcotics, and all that kind of stuff. So that kept me sane. And the fact that I had my family with me, my tradecraft was sacrosanct because not only could I not compromise my asset, I had to do my 2 hours surveillance detection route, but after meeting a terrorist, like I did in Latin America, that I recruited, at 10 o'clock at night on a Wednesday, and now I'm going home, I can't go straight home.
Right.
Because I can't bring that crap back home with me. So now I got another hour and a half, 2 hour SDR going back and around making sure I'm not being followed and taken home. So
how was your experience in the farm? You'd been in the agency for a little bit. I don't know if you knew exactly what to expect or you didn't know what to expect at all. So sometimes we make things massive, in our minds, and then which is sometimes a good thing. Then you're kind of let down by the process because you'd built it up so much. Tell me what you thought about your experience at the farm.
I think it was wonderful because, again, most of us, guys like you, myself, we like being challenged. We like that, being able to overcome something. And going from the paramilitary side to there was a little bit of culture shock. But, I worked at a good men's clothing store when I was in high school, and I learned to dress so I could clean up, so that wasn't an issue. I read a lot, and I had my education, I had my degree. But what the difference was the granularity of, and like you said, often boring, way of having to do things. I mean, people think that you walk into somebody and recruit them. You don't understand that you could recruit somebody in a week. Sometimes it could take you 3 years
Yeah.
of socializing with them and finding out what makes them tick, what keeps them up at night. Those are all the things that, do we have mutual goals? And which is something I'm very proud of. The agency, unlike our communist counterparts, we try to recruit for strengths.
Yeah. It's something else you touched on, which is really unique in a special activities type of unit. And I don't know how you recruit for this, but we seem to do a good job. And that's the way it was explained to me is how I'm going to explain it, is finding someone that'll hit someone in the back of the head with an e-tool one day, and then the next day get in a suit and go to the embassy and brief an ambassador at a high level, and that be the same man. And that's unusual to change gears like that, but it's necessary.
It is. And in our business, it will help you stand out if you have that ability to do both. Clean up well, fit in, and like I said, when you sit across a table from somebody who's a hostile individual that you recruited, or a friendly individual who's a badass, because you're dealing with local counterterrorism guys and that kind of stuff. They've thrown people off buildings. They look across the table to you when you're sitting there having a cigar with them, and there's a level of mutual respect there that, this guy bites back.
Yeah.
And not everybody has that.
And I'll tell you, even from our unit, not everyone could do that. So we would send certain people to do certain things. And hey, some people are just knuckle draggers, and we need those guys.
We need them all.
And some people are just briefers,
Yeah.
and we need those guys
sure.
too.
Yeah.
But there's a special group of guys that can do both, and those are really special people. They just are. Not like, and again, like street smarts, I don't know how you train for that. I don't know what it is in someone's background necessarily that allows them to do that. But when you find it, it's special.
Yeah, I think it's all part of your grooming in life. What your experiences was what gets you to the next step. Survive the next step.
Speaking of next steps, what'd you do after the farm?
I was supposed to go to El Salvador to help run the programs down there, and the last minute they called me up. They said the chief of station in Costa Rica wants you to go down there and run the Southern Front for the Contra program, and you're talking night and day. First of all, the people. Second, the platform.
Yeah.
In Honduras, I was in uniform. I carried a mini grenade, a pistol, a knife, and an AR everywhere I went. Now I'm in coat and tie. I'm still carrying a gun, but I'm in coat and tie working out of an embassy trying to run what was a French resistance light kind of program, because the Costa Ricans, unlike the Hondurans, were very hostile to our program.
Okay.
So they were always trying to find out what we were doing. They were trying to bust us.
Yeah.
So it made it, our tradecraft really got sharpened up there at the time, because, we were under those kind of circumstances, but it was night and day. Yeah. I did that from 86 to 88.
When was the Contra-Iranian affair uncovered?
I would say that was probably, I was in South America in a country that they didn't let me mention, but that was my first official counterterrorism job. And I remember that's when all of a sudden I started getting called in, and you figure I was a GS-12 when I was in front of a grand jury. So I was, first lieutenant in front of the grand jury because of the Contra stuff. Yeah.
Do you remember what year that was, roughly?
88, 89, 90. Yeah.
And can you tell the audience why it was a scandal?
Yeah, it's amazing, because what I know of it is all after the fact.
Right.
When the stuff was going on, I knew what I was doing for the agency and that we were supporting these folks. But, you're this busy, you're not looking into all the politics. But, the Boland Amendment was going on and all these other things. And, Ollie North, who ended up being a good friend of mine much later on in life, had some really cool ideas. He was one of those guys that could had a PhD but could win a bar fight, which is another way of putting it. And he was guy's a stud. He came up with ideas that eventually became very controversial because we were funneling monies from deals with Iran back then. But that none of that was transparent to me while I was there. This is once the balloon popped is when I got dragged into all that.
Yeah, we had certain policies in place that we wouldn't support certain rebel groups, and then we were supporting rebel groups.
Yep.
And like you said, with Iran, we were funding the whole Contra through the sale of arms to Iran.
Yep.
Right after the Iranian hostage situation, when we shouldn't have been really doing anything with them. So it was a bad look in the form of the government saying we won't do these certain things and we won't deal with these certain people, and then we were doing both.
Yeah.
And it goes back to one of those good intentions, because even though it was a controversy, it wasn't one of those where America was doing something bad necessarily. We were doing
totally
good things. We were stopping communism. We just got caught trying to hide it.
Yeah.
I guess is probably maybe the best way to quickly explain it.
It was quite painful, and it deflated a lot of us because obviously the greater majority of us did not know what was going on behind the curtains. And we all have 20/20 hindsight,
Right.
and obviously it was not the smartest thing to do at the time, but it was the only thing that kept the Contras going.
Right.
I witnessed that firsthand.
Right. It's unfortunate that it played out at a political level because the guys on the ground were doing good things, and like you said, had no idea. Even I still have questions to some degree. I'm not sure we really needed the money from Iran to fund that.
No, I think it was the idea. I think the idea was that now we had funds that we didn't have to tell people that we had, so we could keep funding something that half of the politicians were against. So
yeah, and it's not like America was. We're in the middle of a Cold War still. It's not like America didn't want us to fight communism. Yep. So it just seemed to be a little bit unnecessary or unfortunate that it unfolded that way. And I'm sure that had its domino effect on what you guys were doing down there. Did we have the classic knee-jerk reaction where we just stopped everything?
Absolutely. The pendulum swung in the opposite direction. I've always tried to explain that the agency enjoys incredible oversight. But we do, because we're the only organization that has Title 50 authorities. Okay, and
can you explain Title 50 authorities?
Gladly, and I'll give you the perfect example.
Okay.
SEAL team goes into Pakistan and kills bin Laden. Okay, well, that mission, I started the bin Laden task force in January of 1996. I was the deputy chief of station and the senior ops officer in that. And that same little cell that we started with 8 people was the cell that eventually was able to terminate bin Laden. But SEAL team, all special military, has what they call Title 10 authorities. That means in a battlefield, you could do whatever the hell you want as long as your commander signs off on it, right?
Right.
Pakistan, we were not at war with Pakistan. So in order to do that military option, the SEAL team was absconded to the CIA under Title 50 authorities. Title 50 authorities are lethal findings that the president, if he puts his signature on it, those are your marching orders.
Okay.
And that protects our guys legally because, it was the president that said to do so. But that's what it comes up to.
Yeah, that's a great way of explaining it. So let's get. You mentioned it. Let's get to the UBL task force days, if you will. By the way, one of my favorite books is Son of the Jackal by a man I knew a little bit, but you know much better, and that's Billy Waugh.
Yeah.
That book was tough to read post 9/11 because it was both a success story with Carlos the Jackal, and then the unfortunate, almost as always, not by the ground guys
Nope.
at the agency, but at a political level.
Without a single doubt. You know, when Billy was in Khartoum in the early 90s, chasing Carlos the Jackal, I met Billy in 1990 in the Philippines. And for some reason, you know, he liked me. We became friends. We actually, he became a very big mentor for me. So when I got to that position where I was deputy chief of station for the task force, first guy I called in was Billy, because he had been doing surveillance on bin Laden while he was in Khartoum. He was still in Khartoum when we started these programs. So we, with the guidance from Billy and talking to our ground branch guys and you know, our brothers like you from the outside services, we kept coming up with ways of neutralizing bin Laden. And politically, the willpower wasn't there. I remember in the 18 months or so that I was in the task force, because then we had a family medical emergency and I had to leave. We must have formally proposed 6 times operations that were cleared sane by guys like you. I mean, we sit around with our counterparts and go, can this be done? And with a guy like Billy Wasson, I've seen him, I know where it is, I know where he lives. Yeah. Billy used a line for me one time. He says, Rick, I got so close to him that I could have killed him with a pencil.
He could have.
And I'm going like, you probably could have, Billy. Yeah, I know you could have. So that was the mistake. But imagine, we started it in January of 1996. By January of 1997, we had at least 50-fold more information on bin Laden than we had before.
Wow.
All the liaison services that were reporting, all the overhead of the camps, what he was doing, all the intel that was being gathered from assets and you know and everything else.
It's a lot of work.
The painting was, you know, painting was on the wall. I mean, it was there. He is what he is, and the administration at that time, no, well, we don't have enough proof that he is bad. Well, imagine if they would have allowed us in 1997 to take out bin Laden. It'd be like taking Hitler out in 1937, 38.
Exactly. I mean, I don't think most people, unless they read books or there's ardent followers of special operations, know that. Yeah. I really don't. He showed himself to be dangerous with the near simultaneous embassy bombings. Yeah. Killed 24 people, 12 Americans. Where were the 2 places that happened at? Dar es
Salaam and Nairobi, Kenya. Yeah.
And in those 90s, you guys building those target packets, did you know just generally what he was doing? You just knew generally he was planning things. What is it that you knew he was doing or wanted to do?
You got to understand that Khartoum at that time was a hotel for terrorists. If you had money or you were he built the road to Port Sudan. He built a bunch of camps there for training. He gave the government a lot of money. He was in the white, what we call in the white. Sometimes he drove his Mercedes by himself. Sometimes he had some goons behind him that were, mouche, but they weren't bodyguards or anything like that. I mean, one of your teams could have taken those guys out on your worst day. Yeah. And that was the backbone of every plan that we had out there, was how viable it was. Because we knew we had him under surveillance. We had him, coming and go. And he was making it easy because he did not feel threatened there.
Right.
After the embassy bombings, he went to Afghanistan. That was the end of that game.
Why do you said they just didn't see him as a threat. Was it just that simple? Why do you think they didn't have the political willpower to do something about it?
Again, I stay away from politics because I think that it is, the most counterintuitive profession you could get into, as far as I'm concerned. But I think it was the political equities. If we do this, it's Khartoum. Well, who gives a crap about Khartoum? He was bad. We knew that he was bad. The administration had no interest in letting us pull the trigger. Yeah. And as you may recall, later on, they bombed what ended up being like a milk factory or a cookie factory or something, because they said that that's where they were in, which was totally bogus. Yeah. So here you have a legitimate target that you get all source intelligence telling you he's bad, he's coming after us, he's training terrorists. And you have an opportunity to negate that capability, and you don't.
That's something I don't think may ever change, and that's because politics weaves itself in with war and combat. And I think one of the biggest lies I was told in my career, and the further I went down it, the less I believed it, and then at some point I just didn't believe it, which is it's complicated. It's complicated. And they always, the amount of big missions we should have went on and didn't go on because people are scared, and they start worrying about secondary and tertiary effects and what could happen and this and that and this and that. When it is most of the time, I don't say every time, almost every time though, it's black and white. Should we remove a bad guy off the chessboard? Yes. And we'll deal with the aftermath that it is, because you can't guess it. But should we remove them? Yes. And allowing them to stay in out of fear of what ifs almost always has bad ramifications.
Absolutely. No, that is spot on, and we pay the price. Civilians pay the price. Families pay the price. Countries pay the price of that indecision. Yeah, the Bin Laden problem. Don't get me wrong. Terrorism would have still existed. Other Hezbollah had killed more Americans than anybody else before 9/11. So we have enemies out there that are very, very dedicated. But having those opportunities, and fast forward to 9/11, I had taken over as chief of operations at the Counterterrorist Center May of 2001.
Oh, wow.
Imagine the guilt for me, knowing what I tried to do in the early 1990s, 96, 97, 98. And now I'm facing with the fact that we just got our asses blown up and we could have stopped this back there. That became my driving force for the rest of my career. Yeah.
When you put it like that, I could only imagine the people that were on that task force in the 90s begging for something to be done. Doesn't make you feel any better knowing that it wasn't your fault. But still, you tell yourself you could have done something. You can never justify it to yourself.
Yeah, it wasn't our decision, but it was our inability to convince them. And, Mike Scheuer, who was the actual task force chief, was an analyst. And he would have been director of analytical intelligence in the agency. He was that smart of a guy. We loved him because his work ethic and smart and very, very. He was good. He was a good boss. And when the bombings of the embassies took place, the twin bombings, he told that tenant, "You tell the president that, and to you, the blood of those Americans are in your hands."
You want Bill Clinton?
Yep, that ruined his career. He ended up spending the last year at the library writing his first book, kind of stuff. Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him. Because my follow-up question was about to be, do you think Bill Clinton knows? Do you think he lives with that as well? But someone told him.
Yeah,
at least someone told him.
Yeah, but does it make a difference again to politicians? That's not the net zero outcome of stuff. It's they'll just wash it off. I guarantee you, he does not lose sleep at night. I sometimes do. There's times when I sit there in bed, I'm going like, can you imagine if we would have been allowed to do what we do?
Man, that's heavy.
We're the third option.
Yeah.
We are the third option. And this is right down the alley of what a third option operation would have been. Yeah.
Absolutely. Man, how much longer did you spend in the agency post 9/11?
I retired in 2004.
Okay.
And what happened was when, and luckily they let me talk about it in the book. They don't let me talk about our successes, but the fact that I put together a special team at the end, because I was chief of ops, I knew we were going to get hit, but I realized that we had no capability to disrupt or much less preempt an attack like this. We knew something was coming. Everybody thinks that it's like in the movies where CIA knows everything and, spying. It's more like a puzzle, and you have certain pieces that are missing, and you make a collage out of the decision. So shortly thereafter, we were already first boots in Afghanistan, as you know, were my guys.
I don't want you to gloss over that for a second. I hate to interrupt you.
Yeah,
so
no.
please remember where you're at.
Yeah.
Because that's important to talk about. And I love and deservedly so, to some degree, I love the accolades Special Operations gets about 5th Group and Green Berets being first into Afghanistan, putting boots to the bad guys, and they get that those accolades. But that's not necessarily true, because there were already Americans there that they shook hands with when they got off those helicopters. That was you guys.
And that's a platform that I've used, and thank you for providing it again, because it's true. That move, 12 Strong movie, 12 Strong, great movie, don't get me wrong.
Right.
Legit movie, except that the CIA participation is relegated to a guy on a horse with bags of money, and the team leader saying, I don't know who that guy is, but he's got some stones. All right, so the real story was the two things that the agency had maintained, in spite of how badly we were being funded, was our relationship with the Northern Alliance and the fact that we are the ones that developed the Predator. A lot of people don't know that either. Everybody thinks that drones just came out of... No. CIA was involved in that. Cofer Black, my boss then, was a very integral part of that. So it was all there. It was all there. The decisions weren't exactly timely, I guess.
Yeah. There's something else to say about that is you can't create relationships after the fact. And that's what makes, I really think, the CIA's role globally very difficult, because we can't really predict necessarily where the next war is going to be. And you can't be everywhere at once. You really can't. So you do your best guess to say, hey, we're going to either create relationships here, maintain relationships there. But that was a win for the CIA. You guys had relationships where we needed them to be, when we needed them to be there.
The put together of that team, we're talking weeks after 9/11. And my favorite part of that story is Gary Schroen was he was in retirement. Mm-hmm. He was on he had 2 months left. He was going to retire when 9/11 happened. He came back in because he had been the chief in Afghanistan, and he knew Masood. He spoke the language and all that other stuff. Yeah. And we put together this team, and they were the first boots on the ground. And the Triple Nickel, they came in. They were the first military uniform folks.
Right.
But when those 2 helicopters came in, it was my guys on the ground doing this, right, bringing the choppers in. And the fact that that's glossed over, Mike Spann, first American killed in Afghanistan, was a former Marine, CIA, SAD, ground branch guy.
Yeah, that was during a prison takeover rebellion, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's a collateral story that a lot of people don't know. There was a guy that was with him. First name is Dave. Vanilla case officer. This guy had never been in anything, including Boy Scouts. And he ends up pulling the Browning out of his pocket and shooting bad guys and taking their AKs. I think he killed like 9 people, getting himself and a French a reporter that was caught in the melee there. And Mike Spann didn't stand a chance. I mean, when they jumped him, they killed him almost on the spot. But I tell that story because we were talking about, the paramilitary background helping this. Here's a guy that went through the farm, had a conventional tour or so, and now he's gone into this thing, and he ends up the pointy end of the stick.
And tell the audience what they were doing there, like why we had case officers at that prison.
Well, I mean, you look, every paramilitary officer that we have is a case officer. And when I first started, a lot of the PM guys, they used to call us, snake eaters and knuckle draggers, and they were proud of that, Right. And but I came in at at the right time when they were professionalizing, and I remember the quote by one of my bosses, Chuck Kleebauer, saying, he says, "Look, we are not the Central Airborne Agency. We're the Central Intelligence Agency, and our ops officers, our paramilitary PMOs, need to be fully in. That's when the whole shebang went, and we went. There is no such thing as a paramilitary officer in the agency that hasn't been through the farm, fully certified, and done intelligence tours. That's just part of the grooming.
I love that. One of the first times I went to the agency to coordinate with Ground Branch, and the more I worked with them, there's still some degree of separation. I'm going to be a little dramatic about it. It's not this bad, but it is at times. It was very foreign to me because in the military, the ground guys are the rock stars,
Right.
and the intel people support
that,
the
right.
ground guys.
Yeah.
But in the CIA, it's a little bit reversed because they're the central intelligence agency, and the intel and the case officers are kind of the rock stars, and they're almost looked at to the ground guys as some sort of a support element to them, and it's just a different culture, and I understand why. I'm not saying the ground guys are treated bad, but
No, and there was a time there was a class difference before.
Yeah,
but what changed that was terrorism. When terrorism came in, and now you needed people.
Now you need those guys.
Yeah, exactly. Not only do you have somebody who, he went through the farm, but he's a meat eater, and we could put him in Kabul, or we could put him in Khartoum, or we can put him wherever, and they're going to know how to lead under fire. They're going to understand the group.
Yeah.
And I'll go as far as telling you that the guy that used to be chief SOG, Special Activities Group, in the SAD, eventually became the DDO, the Deputy Director of Intelligence. There were political questions there, but nonetheless, all of a sudden, the paramilitary guys became that go-to tool. We got a real problem in a real bad place. Let's not do like we did with Bill Buckley and send a PM or guy no, let's send case officers that are trained in tradecraft that can lead a station and can protect the station and can buttress that fear that's natural for especially first tour officers that don't know what's going on.
But before we leave the Afghanistan story, I just want to paint a picture of what the real first guys on the ground went through. It's different when you go in as an ODA with the might of the military behind you, the might of the world's greatest military behind you, air superiority, a battalion on call when you need them. Like it's. I'm not saying they didn't get put in hairy situations because they did, but you have resources and tons of them. Those first agency guys on the ground are really hanging it out there, and they're hanging it out there in a big way. And they don't have CAS on station. They're
no QRF, no
QRF. They're the ones really figuring it out on the ground because the ODA guys get to come in and say, "Hey, this we've fleshed out most of it. They'll still have to flesh out some things, but they're going there meeting people for the first time, finding out who the real alliance, not just Northern Alliance, but your real allies are on the ground. And if you're wrong,
your life was on the line.
Your life is on the line. They're really hanging it out there.
That first group that went in there is first of all, I know several of them. JR for one, former Green Beret guy. He was because most of them were former paramilitary officers, if not all, that were first on the ground. Imagine going into a country where the leader of the Northern Alliance had been assassinated 2 days before 9/11. FBI calls that a clue. I mean, you're talking. This is we have a problem here.
Yeah.
And now you have a guy like Gary Schroen, who's literally an SIS 2 or 3 senior officer, in the agency, and who's in retirement. He goes out there to lead it. He was already in his late 50s. I mean, it wasn't like he was a 34-year-old buck or something,
Yeah.
And go in there and meet these commanders and try to figure them out and try to, gain their confidence and their commitment while being hunted by the bad guys because, they were already, spreading there. Right. And, there's a scene in the movie where the triple nickel guys, they ride horses into, they get in an ambush kind of thing and they run through the tanks or whatever it was. And that's true. And it's really hairy stuff and really cool shit to listen. But what they don't mention that there were our CIA officers were One of our guys literally shot a guy from horseback. Who gets to do that?
Who gets to do that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
really from horseback. Yeah. So yeah,
I think it gets glossed over. Another reason I think it gets glossed over is because it worked out. And so what I mean by that is when you look at it in hindsight, it's easy to go, oh, it was easy, yeah, right? Yeah. But if you were asked, the general you who were asked to go do that and go into this random country, everyone knows Afghanistan now. No one knew Afghanistan
Nobody
then.
knew anything about Afghanistan.
If you got tasked to do that, you'd be feeling very different every day that you woke up, glad to wake up,
yep,
pulling security nonstop, and this just very, very...
And sitting on $3 million worth of money.
Knowing that there's leaks, knowing that the enemy does know there's Americans on the ground, anyone could turn on you for any moment for that briefcase
Especially
full
in
of
that
cash.
culture, because as you know, that's more of a clan
Absolutely.
property. So if, the chief clan wants your money,
Yeah.
he can sign a deal with you, and then he comes in and kills you and takes it. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
those guys went into a situation that is unprecedented. This is like the OSS paratrooping inside of Germany during the war kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
it really is.
That level
It's a good
of
analogy.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a good comparison. It really is. Yeah. I'm glad we got to talk about that. Like I really am, because those guys, the agency and those guys and everyone involved with it deserve those kudos that I don't think they get. And speaking of those guys, we mentioned them before, but the type of guys who raised their hand, volunteered, forced their way onto it, guys like Billy Waugh, who I think was in his 60s or 70s.
72 years old.
72 years old, walking up and down the mountains of Afghanistan by himself, or in a very small team with a briefcase full of cash. That guy's career, to span from Vietnam all the way to walking the mountains of Afghanistan, just crazy.
Well, as we had the conversation earlier, he was one of my dear mentors and friends, and I was chief of ops when he walked into Kofor's office about Afghanistan. Now, Kofor Black was the chief of station in Khartoum when Billy got Carlos the Jackal. Okay, so Billy walks into Kofor's office and says, "I need to go to the war. I want to go." And Kofor says, "Are you crazy? You're 72 years. You're not going." He goes,
You've already been to war.
here's what he told Kofor. And Kofor was nobody you mess around with.
Okay.
We called him the Hulkster. It was, you owe me because you got your senior grade because I captured, the Carlos the Jackal. And he literally told him to get the F out of his office and threw him out. Billy sat in a corner and wouldn't leave. He was in the outside of the corner. So I get called in, me and Hank Crumpton get called in by Kofor and tells us, what Billy has said. And he says, this guy wants to go out there and blah, 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 blah. This is insane. I said, "Hey, Chief, what changes? If Billy Waugh goes to Afghanistan and he survives, the legend lives on. If Billy goes to Afghanistan and he dies, the legend lives on."
Right.
That's who he is. And Kofor told us, he said, "Oh, you guys signed off on it. I'm not having anything to do with that." And I love that story because that was Billy, all the way. Yeah, 72 years old in Afghanistan, freezing his ass off.
It reminds me of I got to meet Kurt Muse, who was rescued by the squadron that I was in, and he tells a story about when the president is getting briefed at his ranch in Texas about the rescue, and that even when he was safe on a helicopter, guys were body bunkering him to ensure that he
didn't take a round,
they wouldn't take a round. And Bush just sits back and goes, "Man, where do they make men like that?" In
America.
America. And when you tell me that story about Billy Waugh, just that story just echoes in my head. And you tell me that story about 72 demanding he goes back to war, and I just think, where do we get men like that? America.
Like I said, I think that that's a unique trait that we have. Another big mentor for me was Wayne Fisk. Wayne was the number 2 in training when I got my beret. And for some reason, he took a liking to me. I was 21 years old. And to this day, we're best of friends.
Yeah.
I mean, we're very, very, very close. And here's a guy that is, as a matter of fact, I was able to get him, Jose Rodriguez, who was our DDO, he was retired, Billy Waugh, and myself in my house. They wanted to meet because they both had heard about each other. You know, Wayne Fisk was on the Sante raid. He was in the Mayaguez, and he's credited for the last shot fired in Vietnam. And the joke was, don't go anywhere with Wayne because he's the only guy that doesn't get shot. It was like Wyatt Earp, you know, the holes in the coat kind of stuff. He never got nicked.
Yeah.
But he had 4 tours, 2 Silver Stars, and the same thing is how do you forge that kind of person? And I think that we have the right oven here, and
We do.
in the history.
It's easy to pick on this new generation, and they give us reasons to, but at the same time, I think that pool has gotten smaller. But I assure you, and I think you'll agree, America will always produce men like that.
Warriors.
They're still there. They'll be
There's
here. in this
no doubt.
generation.
There's
They'll be
no
the
doubt
next
in my
one.
mind, and
And when things go wrong, everyone will look to those guys.
absolutely,
And they'll pull through.
absolutely.
They just did it in the Maduro raid.
Yep. I mean, textbook. And the fact that they killed 38 Cubans, man, you know how sweet that is to me? You know, that's the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
You know, but no, absolutely. I think that we have a warrior breed that is based on high moral ground and appreciation for this country. And this is why I stayed doing what I did for a long time, because after I did Blackwater, I worked with the soft community for 7 years. And that was the impetus for me, being around individuals. I'm going like, man, it just reactivates my belief in humanity that we do have the capability still.
Yeah.
But we always will be a minority. Let's face it, only 2% of at any given time serves in the military, much less in higher,
Right.
lower and lower tiers or higher tiers. And so it's a minority, and then you have the law enforcement first responder. That's another. You got 90% of the population that's got very little skin in the game.
And I think the pendulum's swinging. I do.
Yep.
I think it swung too far in one direction, and I think it's coming back. I really do.
Well, recruiting shows that. Everybody was bitching that, wow, we can't get recruits in Army, Navy, Air Force, or Coast Guard, or Marines, or nobody. And all of a sudden, they changed the military, the wokeness aspect of which is our demise. And all of a sudden, people are surprised. All of a sudden, we're all topped out. We don't, we got all the recruits we need. Why? Because the people that volunteer, we're a volunteer military.
Right.
The people that volunteer, they're different to begin with. They're going in there for a different purpose. So
And you have to cater to those people. You do. And those are the people you want to cater to anyway.
that's right.
You ended your career at an equivalent of a 2-star level. I think it's the easiest way to kind of translate it. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I mean it's a protocol thing. The SIS Senior Intelligence Service grades. It's like for example, in the GS grade, I was a GS 17. I was an SIS 2 in the agency, and protocol wise, that transmits to. And it doesn't mean that you can go and take the 82nd Airborne and be out there as it does. The people get insulted by that, but it is a way of saying what the ranks
it's a good equivalent.
ranks are, and that was the point that we jumped up from before. When after 9/11 happened, here I am, and I'm an SIS2. I had been offered another deputy division chief job, but I turned it down because I wanted to stay cops. And 9/11 happens. And I come up with an idea of how we could prevent and disrupt in the future. So I came up with a concept that it was pretty basic. It was a stalker team. We would make book, as we could call it, but patterns of life, do the find and fix aspect of X number of bad guys from each terrorist organization, and have those on the books, and have 3 operational plans per We know what mosque they go to. We know what girlfriends they have or boyfriends or whatever it is. And when the time comes, when now you have Hezbollah or whoever, all of a sudden 3 of their senior guys at the same time go bye-bye.
Yeah.
We're penetrated, hit the brakes. So I came up with that idea. I was blessed not only by the DCI, but I literally briefed the vice president, Dick Cheney, and Condoleezza Rice on the programs, and they green-lighted it. That's also the reason I retired, because after 3 years of successful, snooping and pooping, every time we come up with a really good plan to make a difference, and part of it is in the book, the briefing on the one guy we were, really after, and it was a hard nut to crack, but we cracked it. And the director of the agency was there, the DDO at the time was there, and after I finished my briefing, and I had gone through scrubs before. I mean, other the security guys, the CI guys, and everything else for the plans. The DDO said to the DCI, says, "There's no doubt in our minds that Prado and his team can do this. We're confident that they could get away with it." And I went like, "Yeah." Right. Next phrase. However, we have to consider the political ramifications of doing that at this time.
Just what I talked about earlier.
The division chief that was my sponsor for that particular mission got up, closed his Brioni suit, walked out, went to his office, and retired.
I've said it before with the military, but it translates this perfectly. When certain headquarters and the war went on, and just it got harder and harder and harder to get outside the wire.
Yeah.
Most guys, and generally on the white side, but it filtered everywhere to some degree, is that I can't fight 2 wars. I can't fight the bad guys and fight headquarters. Yeah. I can't fight you both, and that took the wind out of so many guys' sails. There were so many Green Berets, great Green Berets, that ended up leaving early in their career instead of finishing out because they refused to do it. And I understand why. And it's just demoralizing.
It is, because you know that you have a moral responsibility because of the skills that God gave you and that you developed. And for all the wrong reasons, you're being negated that opportunity to go do what you were put on this earth to do. And the consequences of that is innocent people dying.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a burden.
Yeah. And I wish saving American blood was at the top of their list over political ramifications. That should be the number one on our list every time. And it angers me. It does when it's clear 100%. That it's not. Our priorities get skewed at a political level, and it's got to change. It's getting better, but we're far from there.
Yeah, we got a lot of catching up to do.
We got a lot of catching up to do.
But it's like everything else. We have the enemies that we have are predators. China has been an imperial power 3,000 years before Christ. Persians were an imperial power, and of course the same thing with the Russians. When we have weak leadership, and like I said, I don't talk politics, but I do talk history. Jimmy Carter was a moral individual, God-loving American, served in the military. He was an admiral in the nuclear subs or something, I believe. But he was indecisive and came across as food. And when you have an individual like that, and look what happened with the Iran, hostage 444 days.
Right.
He gave away the Panama Canal. The Russians invaded Afghanistan as soon as he took over because they knew that they had no opposition.
Right.
Reagan comes in, and the day that he did this and swore in, before he could do this, they had released the hostages.
That's right.
Because they knew, the guy is over. And the point of the story, my point is, we cannot come across as food. We have to be proud of the fact of our might, develop our might, brag about our might, and be able and willing to put our guys down and to do the deeds. Because that's the only thing that keeps people from messing with you.
It's pretty clear that there are individuals or a certain party that is almost ashamed of our power,
Oh, absolutely.
which is crazy because you're absolutely right. We should be proud of it, and we should, in a respectful way, flaunt it, because not just for our own sake, but for the good of the rest of the world.
Of the world.
And if we don't, there will be innocent people by the hundreds of thousands that suffer from our inaction.
I have always said that the day that God forsakes America, He's forsaken the world, because we are that bastion that is willing to lead.
Yeah.
And the rest of you're seeing it right now with the Iran thing. You know, the what is it? The French now are saying, "Oh yes, we'll help you control the." We already got it under control. You know, I remember one comment that was made early on when this whole started that, well, it's obvious that we cannot, rely on the Americans to help us, fight the enemy. And I was so insulted because, and what I said right off the bat, I said the only terrain that the United States gained after World War II was the cemeteries where our warriors are buried. Don't come and tell me, Europe, that you cannot rely on us. No, what you're being told is you have to rely on yourself. You got to be part of the solution, and we will back you up. And if that's not proof, look at all the countries in Europe right now. They're all, even Japan has done away with their non-militaristic stuff, and they're building, the capabilities.
Yeah.
So.
What you just said is so true about the Ukraine-Russian war right now. That I just said America has to be strong, and other people will suffer if we're not. Of course, we have to be judicious of when and where. And I don't think the Ukraine war. It's just my personal opinion. I know it's. I respect other people's opinion on this. This is just mine. But that was a Europe problem, and because we stepped in, the other countries didn't have to. Poland, especially, Germany, all of Europe had an incentive to keep Russia out of their backyard. Yep. And if we wouldn't have stepped in, they would have. Yep. They would out of necessity, but they didn't, because there goes Uncle Sam solving everyone's problem. So I don't think we should solve everyone's problem. But we should be prepared to. That's right. As
an ally. As an ally. It's one of the beauties of the Ukraine situation is that it totally demystified the Russian military superiority.
Boy, did it.
They thought that they were going to go in there like we did in Iraq. Don't get me wrong, that was the wrong war to be in. But 2 weeks, it's all it took, and we took down a country that had a lot more military might and experience than the Ukrainians.
Absolutely.
Russians have been at it for 4 years. Technically, they're getting their asses kicked. They've lost hundreds of thousands of men. They're recruiting North Koreans and Cubans and all kinds of stupid stuff, bringing them in there. That myth of the overwhelming, and what we just did in Iran, if that doesn't tell everybody in the world, go like, guys, you're in a different class. You got to understand that you don't.
Right.
There is no country in the world that can fight the United States in a conventional war and win.
I completely agree. And but again, whether you agree or disagree with us being in Iran, I agree with it, and I can, and you can even more so explain why Iran and Hezbollah has been a problem for a long time. And this is just long overdue. But I've talked about that before. Then go back and see what I've said about that before. But what I really want to talk to you about is Cuba. Actually, it's Trump's last term, he's shown a propensity to take care of problems that other people just don't want
Swept
to
under the rug, yeah.
for a long time. Do you think we'll do something about Cuba?
I certainly hope so, to say the least. And I believe that we will. I think all the writing is on the wall. I think once this Iran thing is over with, the pressures are going to be in against Cuba. You know, a lot of people are looking at Cuba to have a Venezuela-like experience, you know, where we go in there and we capture Maduro. Obviously, imagine the amount of intelligence that we had, that we knew exactly where he was going to be at. And your guys went in and just cleaned up and grabbed him and took him out, you know. So it's a matter of focusing on the threat is a historical threat. Before 9/11, Hezbollah had killed more Americans than any other terrorist group. And their only loyalty is to Iran. The reason I mentioned that I thought Iraq was not the war that we should have gotten into is because we ended up killing the mongoose, because the only natural enemy that Iran had in this hemisphere were the Iraqis. You know, so the fact that when you have somebody telling you every single time, death to Americans, we want to kill you, that's a clue. Right. You know, come on. You know, right. So if you have an opportunity to negate this this kind of atrocities, but the same thing spills over to Cuba. I think one of the things that I love about America is that we have a moral compass of the ethos of the American is the cowboy with a white hat. You know, we got to come in, we got to help. The oppressor liber. You know, right, that concept of mentality, and I think that permeates the American character.
Let me ask you this, and I've heard you say on other interviews that you're not a hyphenated American. You're an American. Mm-hmm. And so I not only bring that up because I don't want anyone to look at your answer and be like, well, he's from Cuba. He has a skewed sense. But before I ever ask you that question, you in other interviews, as if your whole life's work towards this country doesn't say it. Yeah. You've also said yourself, I'm not a hyphen American. I'm an American.
No, so. That was never allowed in my household. My kids were not Cuban Americans. We are Americans. Very proud of my Cuban roots. And when the topic has come up before the interviews kind of took life, people would ask me, why in the agency did I not work against the Cubans? And I said, well, first of all, I have a reputation for being an aggressive guy in operations. But if I'm doing it against the Cubans, they're going to say exactly what you just said. Well, of course he's pissed off at the Cubans. He's Cuban. So I wanted to stay away from that, okay? Yeah. But I always also told them, I said, if we go to war with Cuba tomorrow, I'll go kill Cubans.
Right. So I preface that with to attempt to take the bias perception out of it.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
So the question is, why should we? Why should we do something about Cuba now?
There's a plethora of reasons. And let's start with pragmatism. You have a dangerous dagger 90 miles from our belly. You have the Chinese have an incredible signals intelligence capability that runs out of Cuba. Obviously, now the Russians can't do much about it anymore, but they had a very heavy presence there. And you have a country that, this is the pragmatic side, not the moral side, you have a country that has been undermining democracies for 67 years. From Africa to Latin America to they were in Vietnam, there were Cubans, interrogators in there. So people don't understand that. That's the pragmatic thing. Bad. They need to be stumped up like a scorpion in your baby's bedroom or something, right? There's the moral aspect of it too. You have a people that in 1968 had the third highest standard of living in the hemisphere. The Cuban peso was the equal to the US dollar. The first air-conditioned hotel was built in Havana by Americans, but nonetheless, that level. And for 67 years, they cannot even feed themselves. There's hundreds and thousands of men and women that are in jail because they politically opposed. There was a joke back when in Cuba for the Cubans where somebody says, "Well, the United States is great because anybody could get on a street corner and say that Reagan is a jerk and he should die or whatever," and the Cuban says, "Well, we have the same thing. Anybody in Cuba can stand up and say that Reagan is an ass and that, but you can't say that Castro did it because you'd be gone.
Right.
Yeah, so.
You can say the exact same thing.
Yep.
Yeah, just not the equivalent of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really glad I asked you that question because I love the way you explain things and you have the knowledge and experience and background to be credible. When you say, hey, this is the reason why these are the players, and so I'm really glad you said what you said because I agree with you. We take care of things all over the world, but we won't take care of our own backyard.
Yep.
Let's start there first.
Yeah, I mean, strategically is stupid, and from the Monroe Doctrine on down, and some of the new stuff, this is our turf, and we are allowing two major foreign powers who are our primary enemies.
Right.
Because what a lot of people don't know how immersed Iranians were in Venezuela. I tracked that from the agency. I mean, they had billions of dollars in there. It's that's who our enemies are, and these people that suffer under that, we have a pragmatic responsibility for our country to preempt us being hurt, but we also have that moral responsibility to free those individuals that are being oppressed against their, in very cruel ways. So I think we have the moral high ground, we have the pragmatic high ground, and we definitely have the capability. There was communists are great at propaganda, right? So, Canal says the president, quote unquote, talking about we're ready for the gringos. If they come, we will fight them to the last man. And then they show a video of a dushka on a cart being towed by two ox, and 3 or 4 guys with AK-47s like this playing real ninja, and all of a sudden when they start fighting the dushka, what do you think happens with the bolts? They go apeshit. So I'm going like, okay, so, and here's an example of probably one of the best days in my current life was in Iran when we had the rescue of our pilots.
Yeah.
First of all, because PJs were the guys that finally got their hands on them. Don't get me wrong, you guys were there. We had the air support, but the guys on the ground that went and grabbed them. But then the DCI, the director of the agency, came out and said that we have a capability called Ghost Whisper, I think it was, Ghost Whisper, and is the ability to detect the human heart at great distances. And what people don't understand is we got the first pilot out. The second one was that way somewhere, and that it's not that way somewhere. It could be anywhere. You just don't.
Right.
And that was what geolocated our pilot, was that synergy of intelligence and guys on the ground. And I'm very proud of that. That was a very happy day for me.
What that did to me was two things. Exactly what you said. Just there's been a lot of reasons to be proud to be an American lately, and that's been a nice change.
Without a doubt.
But to hear of technologies like that is really cool. But it's cool for another reason. If you think that's cool, imagine what they haven't told you. Imagine what else we can do that we haven't had to pull off the shelf yet.
Yeah. I was surprised when the DCI said that.
I was too.
And it's never been mentioned again. I think it was probably a Freudian slip or something came out. But in reality, when I heard that, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Ghost Murmur, I think is what it was called.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in contrast, I believe Russia showed themselves and showed how bad they were, and we showed our hand with between Iran and Venezuela, and we haven't even showed our complete hand.
They have no idea.
Think about that
They have
in contrast.
no idea. You've seen the conventional stuff for the most part.
Yeah. Well, what made you write the book, and how did you get any pushback as a CIA operative writing a book?
It was actually the other way around. Like I said, I've always read a lot. So for me, the OSS and being special military and being James Bond and all that was what I needed next to my name. That was my goal as a kid growing up. Never in my 75 years that I thought I would be best-selling author of anything, right? But the guy that started the program, the process, was Cofer Black. I brought Cofer Black to Blackwater after he retired. I was the first CIA guy in Blackwater.
Okay.
And so I brought Cofer in. He was one of our top leaders and everything else. And Cofer would come into my office almost every week and go, "You got to write a book." I'm not writing a book, Cofer. That's just not me. I'm not. I have no interest in that. I've been undercover all my career. I want to keep. I mean, I was overt, but I wasn't advertising a CIA license plate or anything.
Yeah.
And but what got me was, and again, my friend Billy Waugh unwittingly was part of the issue. There's a lady named Annie Jacobson who wrote a book, Surprise, Kill, Vanish, which is excellent book. But Billy's the protagonist for like 70 or 80% of that. I think I got 2 pages on it for giggle's sake. But she's the one that came over to my house. I had never talked to a reporter, investigative reporter before, but Billy said, "I vouch for her. She went with me to Cuba, and we're going to go to Vietnam," and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so she spent 2 days with us at home, and at the end of the conversation, she says, "You have to write a book." I said, "Have you been talking to Cofer or something?" And he goes, "No." He says, "Look, here's why." She's smarter than I am, by far. She said, "Here's why. You have a story. You're bitching and moaning about how the agency is represented, how badly your colleagues are portrayed in the media, in novels, in Hollywood especially. We're all double dealing, doing things that Congress doesn't know about, humanizing, selling secrets, stealing, and just for that alone." So she planted that seed, and one of these times of introspection, I said to myself, I said, we now have, a lot of people don't know this, we have about 144 stars on our wall. The agency is this big. The Directorate of Operations is this big. And we have 144 stars on that wall. A third of those are post 9/11. That means that I, as Chief of Ops, Mike Spann, Jennifer Matthews was in the Bin Laden task force when we started in 1996. So it's a very emotional thing for me.
Yeah.
Very emotional thing for me that you see that we have the capabilities, we pass up on opportunities, and we end up sacrificing people without appreciation of the rest of the country, which is criminal. So that was why. And when Annie finished with me, she gave me the business card of her agent. She says, "I've never done this. I've never given my agent up to anybody because I don't want competition. But you got to write your book." And like I say, the rest is history. But the reason for writing the book was painting a realistic picture of what my agency is all about, the moral high ground, the oversight that we enjoy. Because it's painful, but we enjoy the fact that when we come out of that, we know we're doing the legit thing. And of course, for me, the tipping point was thinking that this book could now, a widow could present that to their kid and say, "This is what mommy or daddy really did during the war."
Yeah.
And that was the impetus for that.
I love it. When I read the book, I don't read as many books as I'd like to, but when it's a book, especially coming from the community, you can just tell when someone writes a book, and I call it a look at me book, and you can tell just through the writing what the intent of the book, and it's a great lessons learned, historical. This is what really happened. Style of writing the book, and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I really did. In fact, I told you earlier we're starting a book club on our Patreon, and that will be on it. Where can they find the book?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's all over. The book is sold well over 100,000 copies. It was New York Times bestseller like 6 or 7 weeks after it came out.
Deservingly so. I love to hear that.
And all surprising to me. But I'm very proud of the book. I'm very proud of the fact that I think that it has made a difference in educating a substantial number of people. And right now we're trying to work something where we put there's a series, TV series or something based on, and that's not my cup of tea either.
Right.
But if it can propel my message, if it's done over 100,000 on print, can you imagine if you get it up on screen?
Yeah.
And now people are going like, wow, there's the message.
Well, I watched you on Jack Carr, so you know some people who can do it. I'm sure, and I hope it gets done.
Thank you.
And there's another reason why I hope it gets done. That you read the book, and we touched on it earlier a little bit about giving the CIA credit on the invasion of Afghanistan that they don't get, and that's. I love all those books up there about special operations that give young men something to look up to. But we need good young men going to the agency as well.
Absolutely.
And they need to know why they should go to the agency. And that's a great book for the future of the agency. And I thoroughly believe that.
Thank you. Coming from you, that's a hell of a good compliment.
I
really
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, I got one more question before I let you go. It's a standard question. Should be fairly. The only hard part about this question with a career like yours is maybe picking the story. Tell me a funny story.
Well, I don't know that it's funny, but it was like the Puerto Cabezas thing was a huge scuba success. We headquarters, against my recommendations, decided that they wanted to do the same thing in Puerto Corinto, which was on the west side.
Okay.
Which was that was the commercial belly for Nicaragua. So they said, look, we want to use your divers. Can they do it? I said, of course my divers can do it. And they said, well, but we want to have the guys who drive the boats to be the regular FDN guys, because I said, they don't get along. They don't like each other. They don't trust each other. So this mission went on, and it was a total goat rope. The boats that we given them broke down. They were fighting each other. And long story short, those 8 men were stuck in Nicaraguan territory, grounded.
Yeah.
So I was in Amapala, I think it was, in the Gulf of Fonseca, and I had a helicopter. So I went in, and we knew that one of the boats was in Nicaraguan waters, but it was just bobbing there. It had broken down, and I did a helocast into the water with fuel, tools, spark plugs, and 2 sticks of C4, and stable rigs that I made out of rope, because I said, if we cannot start the boat, I got to get my guys out, but I'm blowing that thing up. I'm not, So that was the first. It's funny now, but at the time was pretty hairy. Got the guy out, got those first guys out. Then that night we went back out again and found the second boat, who was literally in the mangroves in Nicaragua, in Nicaraguan territory. And of course, because we had gone in there with a helicopter 12 hours before, the Sandinistas were all over us. So here we are on a 30-foot Boston whaler with twin Corvette engines thing. And I have an AR-15 and a Browning. That's going to do me a lot of good. And these guys are popping flares everywhere. They're doing recon by fire, trying to see where we were at. Yeah. And we were able to geolocate our guys. And then the next morning with the Piranhas, which you're probably aware of, Piranha capability, we went in there, we got our second guys out. And that's my favorite story, because here you have a failed mission. Yep. But it meant so much to me, because I remember going to Leon Williamson, who was the base chief at the time, great friend of mine, Vietnam vet, Green Beret guy. And I said, I'm not leaving my guys behind. And he goes, well, I knew that was coming. What are you going to do about it? And then when I told him, he goes, you're crazy, but let's do it. And to have a boss that allowed you to do that, there wasn't any going to headquarters saying, Mother, may I kind of stuff. We was very proud of that. That was my first medal in the agency, which came as a total surprise, because I was just doing my job. But it is not a funny moment, but it's probably the most fun to tell story because the outcome of Puerto Cabezas was a military success. This was a moral success. The fact that we did not leave our guys behind.
Was the first bridge operation? There's so many things that can go wrong when you're doing underwater stuff. Now partnered underwater stuff. Generally speaking, did that operation go smooth?
It actually did, except at the very beginning. I still have the scar to show it. So we're going out. We were in Puerto Lempira. There's a big lagoon. We had a PT boat that was waiting for us on the other side of the lagoon. So we go out. We're going out on a small boat. We have all our gear. We have our divers. We're pulling the panga, which is the wood canoe that we're going to use because it's local and it's low profile and all this. And when we get to the edge, the waves were so bad that the outboard motor started falling out of the boat. I grabbed it. I was pretty beefy back then. Pulled it back in the thing, fell backwards, and the oar hooks where one of them was broken, and it dug into my arm, just tore my arm apart. And of course, I bandaged it up. People goes, "You got to go to the doctor." I said, "No, doctor.
Not now.
48 hours from now." So it did not start well, but the rest went like clockwork. We were able to get. We had timed it. One of the things that was really cool about that operation is that we did it around midnight. It was set to blow up like a 2 o'clock in the morning kind of thing, because we didn't want to have the collateral damage. We didn't want the Sandinistas to be able to say, "Oh, they killed 15 innocent people," and anything else like that. But we got I got in the water with my guys. We swam we went in our pangas to a particular point. The divers went in the water, and we blew the thing up. Got out and made it back home. And next thing we know, it did go boom, and it was a success. So other than the incident with the boat, and like my best friend Steve Bailey always says, this is pride is forever. Pain is temporary. Pride is forever, and chicks love scars. Fact. So I'm going like, that's okay, I got a story. So
I'm glad you told that story. Because I don't think people realize something stupid almost happens every operation. And usually the bigger the operation, it's always something.
Always.
And
look at the Bin Laden raid. First thing we lost was a helicopter before we even started.
Yeah. The motor almost fell off the boat.
Here you are in this little wooden boat going bang, bang, and here goes the little outboard motor just flying off the back.
And then you get a scar from a broken oar hook. It hasn't even started. And you're already bleeding, and everything's falling apart. And you just have to, at some point, just stop and almost laugh about it.
And it was,
why not?
Yeah.
When you told about the story about the second one about helo casting in, I also realized there's not a badge for this, but maybe there should be. Not only do you have a combat dive operation under your belt, you have a combat helo cast.
Yep.
And that's pretty.
Well, again, I have a lot of pararescue friends that just go like, "You got to be kidding me! We've dreamed of that and doing this."
Right.
So, well, dreams come true.
Absolutely. Right place, right time.
Yeah. And one of you've done helo casts, and how they're supposed to be. We used to call them low and slows.
Yeah.
And the pilot of my chopper was a Honduran pilot. He was not a water pilot. So when I told him, I said, "You got to get down to 15, 20 feet," it was more like 30 yards. So, and doing a helo cast, that was
rock
fun.
Your world.
That could rock your world a bit. Luckily,
hopefully, it was going high and slow at least. You add speed onto that. And
He wasn't hovering. He wasn't hovering. And as soon as we hit the water, he kind of actually went away and was staging because I was be able to communicate in case we'd had to get our guys. And I don't think he would have been able to do it. Get the aircraft close enough to the water to hook up my guys on homemade stable rig.
Yeah.
I don't think that he would have had the nerve to pull that off. So I'm glad we were able to start the boat.
Awesome. Rick, I cannot thank you enough for coming down here and spending time with us and telling your stories. You have no idea how grateful I am. Guys, if you enjoyed this interview, I assure you there's so much more the book tells. And not only is it worth your time and a read, it's worth it supporting a great American.
Well, thank you. That's a huge compliment, and I will give it back to you. It's This has been one of the most refreshing ones for me. I think Jack Carr's was another one that was great. But why? Because the interviewer gets it. Jack Carr gets it. You guys served, have been in harm's way, both had a affiliation with the agency at one time or another. So it was a lot of fun. I appreciate it, and I even enjoyed the smoke of your cigar.
We'll get one for yourself after this. Get back to your Cuban roots.
There you go.
And I'm gonna need you to sign that book for me. And that book's going right back on the shelf of my favorite books that's up there in the locker. Rick, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you for having me, buddy.